Welcome to episode 197 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast. This is episode 2 in the 3-part series focused on how to influence and really motivate people to move forward. This can be customers, external or internal to your organization. In part 1, we explored the 5% Club and starting with the end in mind with Mr. Suzanne Wooley and Stephen Edney, two of the leading experts globally in relation to how to influence and truly drive change. In this part B, we're going to explore setting effective meetings, asking powerful questions, and also telling a compelling story. How do you truly influence and motivate through storytelling? Without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where we share knowledge from global experts in how to create high-performance, agile cultures of continuous improvement and innovation. Cultures where employees wake up smiling and excited to go to work and make a difference. Cultures where leaders feel they have the time to proactively serve the growth of themselves and others.
I'm your host, Brad Jevons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. By improving our organisations, we create a better future for generations to come. An economy where our children and grandchildren can experience the joy of owning their first home. An environment where they can enjoy holidays on clean beaches and marvel at the beauty of nature. A future where they feel safe, respected, and empowered to make a difference at work, bringing that energy home to their families and communities. This show is proudly brought to you by the Enterprise Excellence Community and Group, which is focused on helping organisations create this better future through this podcast, our community, where you can engage with global experts, tour best practice sites, and also our workshops focused on the most important topics to truly help your organisation improve into the future for those it serves. Visit enterpriseexcellencegroup.com.au to learn more. We're now going to go into the next section, which is setting effective meetings, the post aspect of precision selling. So, Stephen, why do the best salespeople actually take the time to think about setting an effective meeting with some structure using the post technique? Like, why is it important?
I think the reason why it's important is because people are busy, right? Buyers see a supply come in one after the other. And actually, how much time is kind of really wasted from a buyer's point of view. Equally, from a salesperson's point of view, how many hours a week are we actually on the field of play? When we talk with people, it could be that some people in key account management, you might only be on the field of play for an hour and a half or 2 hours a week, actually in front of your customer. If we're in frontline sales and we're more field sales, those number of hours may be more. It may be that we're in front of our customers, for a handful of hours per day or per week. Ultimately, that time is valuable time. And to be able to have a way of framing every single meeting, we use POST, which just stands for purpose, outcome, structure, and timing. And that allows us to frame the mind for ourselves. Most importantly, it allows us to frame the mind for our buyers or our internal stakeholders by kind of exploring that aspect. A purpose is the purpose of this meeting. Why are we here? And it could be that we're having a meeting about the relationship, checking in how we're doing with each other. Or it could be the purpose of the meeting is a review, or it could be that it's a brand plan, or it could be a new product development launch, or whatever is the purpose. But that's the reason why we're here. The outcome, and it goes back to sort of starting with the end in mind, the same sort of philosophy, which is the outcome is, by the end of that meeting, how do you want your customer to feel? And what do you want them to have kind of got from it? So they're feeling as having an emotion. It could be clarity, it could be confidence, it could be excitement, as well as what are the next natural steps? Where's it taking? So that gives certainty, it gives expectation, which are two of the psychological triggers that allows people to kind of go, okay, we've got this together. So a feeling and a tangible as an outcome, we frame it. Structure-wise, we just want to let people know what's going to go on. No surprises, right? So structure might be a couple of introductions if required. And then it might be saying, hey, I've got a few questions because I really want to understand what's important to you right now. So you're just letting people know you've got some questions. And then we want to say, actually, once we've understood, we want to then check in. That's actually, what do you place most value on right now? You're going to weigh, depending on what your priorities are. And then we might then lead through and share something which is relevant, which might be a story or something, recommendations. And then we want to just agree on next natural steps, when we're going to next meet, get the date in the diary in before we leave, for example. And then the T is for timing. Hey, we've got 25 minutes. Does that still work for you, Brad? 25 minutes, Suzanne, does that still work for you? So just having a nice simple post frames the meeting, allows us to have preparation. We can then send it over in Outlook, so everybody's aware of it. Even if people don't read it in Outlook, then psychologically, 99% of the way we consume stuff is subconsciously. We'll just kind of put it in there, and we kick off the meeting by saying, hey, great to see you. The purpose of this meeting is, and then you just go through the post. And a number of our customers, buyers, they then just say to us after they get it into the culture, hey, no post, no party. It's a case of, if there isn't a post, once it's in the culture, we're not coming to the meeting, because it is a time saver. It really makes it efficient and it helps people.
I love that description of it, Stephen. So really, in essence, buyers are busy running from meeting to meeting. Salespeople can be busy running from meeting to meeting. And the post really provides that framing to just make sure that you can place yourselves and be effective together for that time. That's highly valuable. And you mentioned there, the post stands for the purpose, the outcome, which I love. You mentioned, how do you want the customer to feel, but also the outcomes and the next steps, the structure or the agenda for the meeting, and the time allocated. It's a really simple concept, but very powerful in its application.
Thank you. It'd be interesting, Suzanne's, you've got lots of experience about this, and internally and externally.
Yeah, I think this was the part of thinking about the process that surprised me so much. I remember certain people saying, oh, it's so frustrating when I get a meeting and I didn't know what it was about, and then I get there and I shouldn't have been there. That was internally. And I think I took for granted how much you think that people do this, but it was really interesting hearing the examples. And then when we reflected and said, imagine what our buyers feel like when they get that. So this was just a really simple technique to have a think about how you make the meetings more productive. And I would hope now, I definitely see it within our culture, that people are much clearer in the Outlook invite. And I hope that our customers would see the change in perhaps sending a pre-read or in attaching the information, rather than feeling like we've got this golden surprise that we're going to take and launch on them when we arrive. Sending some information in advance that people can reflect on, so that the time that you've got together is about discussing rather than reading through or seeing the slides that you're taking them through. And together with courses that we've done on presentation skills as well, we try to keep things clearer so that we're making the most of the moment with people. And like I said earlier, creating solutions that work for everyone rather than downloading information. So yeah, definitely within the Outlook invites that we've got, within the culture of our business, I see much better clarity on what's expected from a meeting. And again, those personality types, giving people information who can reflect on things before they're in the moment. Some people like to make a decision on the fly, others like to reflect on it. And that means that you're more likely to get to a decision if those people have been given information that they like to look at in advance. This is a really big one internally as well for us. So even just last week, a member of our executive leadership team sent out a note and a great video reminding us of these principles and suggesting that we actually try and stick to just 5 slides, that there are no more than 5 slides, because if you can't get it on 5 slides, why on earth have we got all of these slides to run through? So it's really pertinent in our business, not just the time that we take from customers when we're trying to meet with them.
I love that aspect too, Suzanne, that you're even looking at it now, the post, and what can we do before the meeting, and the pre-read, which can then make the post even more targeted and really valuable when you're in front of the client with that really precious time and the buyer's time. Really, really impressive.
Yeah, and I think, when you're meeting with people as well, again, back to the person, things change. So yes, you might have 40 minutes in the diary, but it might have changed. So when you ask the post up front, does this still work for you? Is this time still there? If someone says to you, actually, this has come in and this is the reason we've got to change, you understand more. Whereas I think sometimes as salespeople, you think that you've got 45 minutes or an hour. You start off with your chatting and then they say, actually, I need to pull it short, and there's a big frustration there. So if at the beginning of the meeting you're having a conversation and someone does have to change things, you understand why, and there's more of a mutual relationship of understanding, really.
And you can adapt and pivot from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So
things
everyone,
happen, right? For all people, things change.
I think in sales we've all experienced it, haven't we? Yeah.
Yeah, and ultimately, all of these tools within a process are there to help, right? And how often, if we stand in from a buyer's point of view, they've kind of got meeting after meeting after meeting, and we may have agreed a meeting, 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, and at the time is that everyone was excited to be able to book the meeting, no problem. But then you kind of almost forget, or you're kind of running from one meeting to the next meeting. By just using something like a post, by the time we said, hi Suzanne, hi Brad, great to see you again. Just as a reminder, the purpose of this meeting is, and the buyer, you literally see them kind of go, yeah, brilliant. Okay, I knew that I was going to see you. I knew that we'd put some time in, but I literally bounced from one meeting to the next meeting. But yeah, this is the purpose. We're here to be able to talk about that. Great. We've signaled, we've kind of waved a flag to it. And we're kind of now settling in, but doing it in an efficient, really human way. And it's there just to frame up front. You kind of get into it quickly. It just helps people just to settle down and to be really, really then present for the reason why we're here. And as Suzanne says, if we need to adapt, we can adapt because we know what we're adapting around.
It places us on the same page and starts the meeting off in the right direction. Brilliant. So everyone, that's the section where we've explored setting an effective meeting using post. A really simple but powerful technique that, again, up the front of our sales process and our approach is really helping us be in that top 5%, that 5% club. The next topic we're going to look at now is powerful questions, which was a key aspect, again, of all the research that's been done by Expression for Growth and the experience of Suzanne throughout her career as being a key aspect of the top 5% club. So, Stephen, why is asking great questions something great salespeople do?
So as Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, wrote, actually, if we can seek first to understand, then check that we've understood. So the powerful questions is right at the heart of what we believe is part of being 5% club, right? Of course, we want to understand what are people's motivations, their intentions, their challenges, the things that they're handling. But, the speed of change just goes faster and faster, and the gaps between change get shorter and shorter. So we may have been working with a particular person or an organization or a customer for some period of time, but things change, and we need to understand kind of what's going on, what's driving things. So creating great questions is another area which we've understood is often very deficit in salespeople. Now, at best, people might then have a topic that they want to talk around, but very rarely, goes back to that 95% club, hardly anybody actually creates questions and writes or types questions to actually ask. And so when we explore that and we understand some of the sort of psychology around it as well, which is, why is it that people do that? And people go, well, they're my customer. So they from a psychological point of view, that's quite deep. It's my customer. Well, they're not really, they're just an organization. But if it's my customer, therefore I'm meant to know everything, aren't I? If I know everything, I don't need to ask questions. Now, whether people are overtly saying it, but they're thinking it. So often people do not ask as many questions. They start with a presenter and they start, talking at and presenting. And then when we understand another bit of a psychology within it, which is as small people, young people, children, what's the number one question that young people ask?
Why?
Why, right? This curiosity. But as we get older, then actually 80% of questions that come out of adults' lips are closed questions. And check it out, listen. Just listen, whether you're picking up kids from a school run or just out and about, just hear how many people just ask closed questions. Have you had a good day? Is this something you'd be interested in? Types of, could you do that? Because they're closed questions, you're going to get a closed response. And through a closed response, it's just going to put more pressure on you, therefore, to do the talking. So then you'll go into premature early selling, for example. So it's a really interesting topic from a psychological point of view around actually why people typically don't write and prepare questions. The difference, this is one of the biggest game changers that people find by having precision selling and starting with real good questions. It goes back to that start with the end in mind, because if you're clear about what you want to have as an end objective, you can be really clear about what is it that you bring to the party? The reasons they'd say yes to you, PepsiCo, or for the brand, or for the category, or for the product, or for you as a sales professional. What is it that you bring, and what is it that the other person gets? The benefits that they get for their organization. Maybe it's some of their penetration or frequency or weight of purchase. Maybe it's the human things around make my life easy, de-risk it, make me look good, help me hit my KPIs, my targets, my bonus. And through those elements, and we call them hats on hooks, right? So, customers have their needs, which are the hooks, and we have our solutions, which are the hats. And we want to throw those hats on the hooks and to be able to make it really just be able to understand where people place value, understand where people have challenges. And we frame them into a number of different questions called like big open questions, which get the conversation going. Then we have focused open questions, which are the high influencing questions. And then we have probing questions, which are the curiosity questions.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And the structures to it, especially around the focused open questions, I found that insightful myself throughout my time getting to learn precision selling and expression for growth. Steve, one topic I wanted to ask you on a bit further is the question funnel concept and leading that question funnel using big open questions, probing open questions, focused open questions. But then also at the end of it, when you're really at that time to pass off to you presenting, you're going to get that end time of the customer talking, the pivot. Do you mind just taking us through the question funnel and how that could look with big open questions, probing open questions, and then the pivot at the end?
Yeah, sure. So, you mentioned about funnels. Funnels are just like, going to, read a book or to watch a Netflix series or something. A funnel is just a chapter, right? So we just we might have a few chapters. And, a funnel, the first funnel might be about, how business is doing. How is business performance, for example? And then you might have a second funnel or second topic, which might be around category. And then another one might be about either the relationship or ways of working or implementation. So I think the first thing is whatever is your objective, break it down into some clusters, which might be chapters or funnels, for example. So, groups of 3 are pretty good. It's like how, business performance, kind of the reason why you're there, which might be a category or something, and then either implementation. So that might be something as simple as that. And then once you've got each funnel, then it's really starting off with what we call big open questions, which is get the conversation going. It's a bit like a classic. How has the business been going over the last 3 months since we've been going? And I'll get my arms as big as I can on this Zoom call for you, right? But it's a case of you just want to be able to be expansive and have it as big and see what information comes flying back. Then once somebody then starts talking, they start giving you that information, you want to encourage them, right? Just keep on pulling that information. So then we want to have some probing questions. Oh, that's interesting, Brad. That's interesting, Suzanne, you mentioned that. What is it about that which is driving this? Which are those probing questions, just to get deeper, like a scuba diver. Going deeper, just to be able to understand really what's at the nub of things. And then the focused open questions, these are the highest influencing questions. And those of you who've experienced precision selling, you all know this already. It's about creating those reasons to say yes to your objective, and the benefits that somebody else is going to get, the customer is going to get, or the shopper is going to get, or the consumer is going to get. You can extrapolate those benefits. And really you want to be able to ask that as a focus open question, which might be, for example, what impact would a proven sales methodology have to increase the bench strength of your organization and confidence with your teams? Now, that's a focus open question because it's something we've got and something that other people will get. And ultimately, if you get an affirmative, some sort of a nod or a, that'd be interesting type response, then that is a need. You've identified a need state. And a lot of people might talk about needs, but if you have a focused open question, a reason to say yes and a benefit, and somebody says yes or is interested in it, then you've understood a need. And if you've understood a need, you've actually so far down the way of convincing somebody to say yes. And once you kind of get an affirmative of a focused open question, then you want to probe again, but you want to probe for value and probe for visualization, which is the high influencing bit. So it might be, Brad, Suzanne, I'm interested. I'm glad you're interested in this. That's great. How much value would you place on it? What impact do you believe that could have over the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? If we were to jump forward 9 months, what could that look like in your organization or culture? So then these are all probing questions. Once you kind of got a yes to what you bring and what they get, that need state, then get them to visualize and create value through probing questions. And you kind of then end up kind of having a number of those for each topic. You might have, a few big open questions. You might have a bit of probing after each big open question, 1 or 2 focused open questions, and then a bit more probing for value and visualization. And then when you're closing out that funnel, that first topic, that's when we want a closed question. The power of closed questions comes in then when we want to clarify and confirm. Suzanne, thanks for that information. Brad, thanks for that information. You've said this, this, and this. Have I understood that correctly? I have, or I haven't. Brilliant. Okay. Right. Have you got one more thing you want to talk about before we move on to the next funnel or topic? So they are closed questions right at the end, but they are to confirm, clarify, and control the meeting to move on to the next area. So closed questions are just as powerful as open, but it's about when you deploy them.
Yeah, I can see it's very powerful, and for me, this is a really enjoyable topic of the event and building capability. Suzanne, how has this approach help your team at PepsiCo, really exploring questions and how we ask them in the funnels and everything that goes with it?
Well, I think as salespeople, let's face it, we like to talk. So many people do their preparation in terms of what they're going to talk about. So I think when we looked at questions, some people think that, to the point that you said, Steve, I should know it, or I already do know it. I've been to this customer for years, or I've been coming for the last, 18 months. I know it. But actually making sure that our team are considering what questions they prepare to say, what's happened since we last met? Or can you tell me about the goals right now? There's always things that change. And if you don't ask those questions, you're really not going to understand what's appropriate right now. So this was another light bulb moment where everyone really thought about it is important to ask questions. It's not just when I'm new in sales or I've just met this person. It's every time you go, you should be asking questions. And the other thing to consider is we're not suggesting that anyone asks 15, 20 questions. You don't want an interrogation when you meet with someone. You just want a few relevant ones that, as someone that's buying something, that you feel like you're understood and that someone wants to understand where you are right now. So I think for the account team, that was really great to revisit the importance of asking questions. But for me, the big impact has been with the field team as well on this. So again, you've got limited time, as most sales interactions are. But when I'm out with the field team and we talk about questions and we ask open questions, there's just always a better result. And when people ask closed questions, perhaps in the start of the day, if I'm coaching someone, and then we talk about try and focus on 80% open questions and 20% closed questions, there's just always a better outcome. And inevitably, there's some information that they didn't know that has come up by good questioning. So for us, this has been great in terms of making sure our account managers are considering what they ask every time and preparing those questions. And for the field team, having the right questions prepared, and we've got like a questioning bank now that we put together. And we're even working with a distributor of ours to talk to them about how they can ask great questions when they're selling to their customers. And we're going to look to enable them to have their own questioning bank. You don't have to ask every question, but what have you got there that you can select from today that's going to help you understand and connect better?
I love that questioning bank, Suzanne. I often think in the events, there's all these great questions being shared by team members because team members actually explore great questions. And I don't see people writing them down enough. I'm always like, write them down, steal with pride. This is great. But to hear that you've actually created a bank of those questions at PepsiCo, that is a brilliant step. Well done.
Yeah, and I didn't touch on them, but the replay as well, the pivot is a real one that I think makes everyone feel heard. People can show they're listening through nodding, smiling, body language, but to have someone repeat back what you said, you're like, yes, you've got me. Or you can correct them. Actually, no, it's slightly different to that. It gives you that opportunity before someone goes off on a tangent with something they misunderstood. So yeah, I think for all of us, when someone replays what you've said, you feel important, you feel heard, and you're happy to move forward.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant.
And it's such an interesting aspect, isn't it? Because, you know, when we're talking about the 5% club or the 95% of the fog of sameness, when we are objective and we look at things and our own behaviors, we might know something, we might know the difference intellectually about open and closed questions, but how much of it is our habit? How much of it, as Suzanne talks about, is every single time we want to lead with asking some questions to make sure we have the latest intelligence. We have the latest checking of information, for example. And then when we're asking those questions, of course, we're actively listening, we're tuning in because we want to understand, we want to build that connection. And we're also taking notes, and whether it's written notes or whether it's typing notes, but what people will be able to then experience that you are listening, you're hearing, you're taking notes. And if we are taking notes, that's the number one non-verbal way of building trust. And as Suzanne was talking about, then if people are asking questions and they are actively listening and they are making notes, those notes can then be used to play back and to summarize. You know, seek first to understand, check with understood. If we haven't quite understood correctly, then there is an opportunity to have it adjusted, isn't there? Because we may have missed a certain aspect. But equally, we've then got really good information around what is important to the customer. And we can ask her or him back around that. We can also make quote marks around the notes and quotes. So later on in the process or on another occasion, we can then go back and say, hey, Brad, hey, Suzanne, previously you said, and it is a very exact quote, and it will take them back into that moment. And it's a very powerful part of that process of listening through those questions, the responses, making notes, putting quotes, putting a little mark down, which is one of their needs, a little symbol so you can play back the pivot. And the pivot really is a summary of summarizing what you believe is important to your customer, her or his needs, asking if there's anything else. Have we missed any of those needs, those hooks? And if there is anything that we've missed, what is it? And then we can capture that. And that'll help us later on, because an objection is later on is a need that hasn't been satisfied yet, right? So if we just say, thanks, Suzanne, for all that information. Is there anything else that's important to you around this topic? Oh, there is. Brilliant. And then how would you prioritize those needs? What comes first, second, third, fourth? And then once we understood the prioritization, then we can then start to consider which order should we then be sharing relevant solutions.
Mm. Which then moves us on to the next topic. I think everyone listening, just to allow you to reflect from me running events as a facilitator for Expression for Growth, when there's a real play that happens at the end of precision selling where we get to put into practice what we've learned, and there's a few different examples I can share with you that'll help you sort of reflect where am I at the moment when it comes to questions. So one example, and it's normally when someone's very nervous and they just go through habit, they get into the meeting, they shake hands, how's your day? And then they pull up the laptop and start presenting. That's like one extreme. no questions. The next extreme, well, not extreme, you're coming back a bit, is where we do follow habits still a fair bit and we use closed questions. Now, the meeting can feel a bit more like an interrogation and you get less data out of it. And when you present, it's lacking impact. The other extreme, where you get to the really up towards the 5% club, is where you're in the meeting and you've got the post happens and then you shoot the breeze, build a rapport, and then the questions happen, but they're happening in a really good funnel type flow or chapters. And there's a really nice flow to it using big open questions, probing to go deeper, focused open questions, great mini summaries, and then the pivot right at the end, and it's just beauty. And you know that then they're well set up to have a very good, compelling story, which is our next topic we're going to talk on now. So compelling story. Of course, we mentioned that everything you do leading up to this sets you up for a great story, a great presentation, a way to present it in a really compelling way. Stephen, why is the way we present and tell a story a key part of great salespeople?
Well, Brad, people love storytellers, don't they? You know, a compelling story is just that. However, in business, there are a lot of boring presentations. You know, just imagine, Suzanne, Brad, any of you who are watching or listening to this, how many presentations do you think you have sat through in work through your career? Probably hundreds, maybe thousands, right? But how many do we actually remember? Most of them are just kind of pretty kind of, I don't know, just too much data being packed in, slides which are really might question whose benefit of the slides. Is it for the person who's presenting? Is it almost like their safety blanket? Is it their script? Have those slides, if there are slides, been designed for the audience's benefit or the presenter's benefit? So there's just a lot of really dull, boring presentations. Suzanne was mentioning earlier around things like 5 slide guides, you know, a maximum of 5 slides, or, you know, it's about actually having that editing process. But the more that we can think about compelling stories, a bit like Walt Disney or movies, the better we can simplify and just have a nice, simple flow to a story. Now, what we do want to be able to do is have fewer bits of information, but have information that's going to really help the audience to connect, to land, to kind of get it. And there's a quote, which is a Mark Twain quote. So, "I'm sorry it's a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one." And I don't know what the maximum number of slides in PowerPoint is. I don't think there is. I think it's unlimited, right? And I think some people go for, you know, their own personal best of how many to go for. But ultimately, if we simplify a great story, where we want to captivate people, you know, size of a prize, the hook, what's the big thing that we could do together? Then we want to set the scene. This is what's been going on, just to get people kind of go nodding and kind of go, oh yeah, that's familiar with the category or the performance or something. Then we want to solve a problem. Take the audience to the edge of a cliff. You know, the tone of voice needs to change. However, we're lacking, we're underperforming, we're missing out on something. And we need to know that problem, that gap, that lack of, even if it's an opportunity to do more, we need to frame it as an issue that we haven't got more yet. So we're currently underperforming, we're lacking, we're missing out. And that's the number one salesperson's job, really, is to understand what the gap is, that solve a problem. And then the first option is, well, we have the opportunity to do nothing, or the cost of delay, the consequence of doing nothing, or the cost of not doing it yet. And if we can't live with a consequence of delay or consequence of not doing it yet, and that might be monetized every month, every trading period that we're not doing it, it's just going to cost us this, and we're going to hemorrhage this sort of money. It means if we can't live with that, we've got to do something, and that's where we can sell the solution. These are the recommendations, these are the hats, you know, our solutions. These are the reasons to say, yes, this is what you're going to get, the benefits. And then we can have our recommendations, and then we can recaptivate at the end. So a nice simple flow of captivate, set the scene, sell the problem, sell the solution, and then recaptivate at the end, and enjoy being the storyteller. And that's where those notes that you've taken can come back, because it's your audience, your customer, it's their voice. Previously, you've said this, Suzanne or Brad. And this is where it shows up. So allow the intelligence that you've pulled to be part of the narrative and your audience to be part of the story.
It's amazing. I was keen to ask you, Suzanne, on this. Can you remember back the first time that you went through a compelling story and saw how it connects to so many stories are structured throughout the world, and how it's a common type of flow right the way back through literature, really, the story loop that Expression for Growth use, and how has it helped PepsiCo?
Well, I thought you were going to ask how it helped me. I think I'm a little bit ruined now when I watch movies with my kids, because inevitably I see every Disney movie and then there's somebody died and I'm like, it's okay, we're on the precision selling journey out of it. So when my kids get upset because someone just died in the movie, but it's a really good analogy that you use about movies. And it's interesting. You want to keep watching, but there's nothing, even if you think of a movie, when there isn't a great flow to it, you're out, you dial out, and we don't want our customers dialing out. So this is really good for getting our team to think about how they make an interesting story and how they're the storyteller, and how the PowerPoint slides aren't just clicked through, that people are looking at you and they might add value to you, but you've got an interesting story that you're delivering. And also when it comes to like body language and what you're saying as well, to see the team on the first couple of days and then at the first day and then see them after the couple of days and what they deliver, I just love that difference, the real plays and the cross-pollination between people seeing their colleagues present, and how they've changed from making a potentially bland couple of slides, then become an interesting story and delivering it really strongly is fantastic. And that's what I love in the feedback when we hear, it was great to see other people doing it. It was great to see ideas. It was great to see different styles of how people brought their topic to life. There's a lot of learning through those real plays, and that's great to see.
Yes, and I can vouch for that. I love when I see the team member from PepsiCo who really pushes that out of the fog of sameness to another level. They break out of that fog of sameness and they present this compelling story, sometimes not even using PowerPoint. Like, I think there was one chap who just used props, and I can't remember his name, sorry, but it was brilliant. And I think that's the one that sticks in my mind the most.
Yeah, I'm sure you remember a few of them now, but I absolutely agree. When people bring things in and they don't do it with customers, and that here we are just having a conscious consideration of what we're going to do, it's great to see people try new things in a safe environment.
Yeah, I think one that will stick with me, and I didn't actually see it, was your Ribena room that you set up in the UK. Like that's rising above the fog of sameness, that one. Stephen, I was keen. Oh, sorry, Stephen, I'll let you go on.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think for people watching or listening, having a couple of nice, simple tips around it, because you talked about like PowerPoint slides, and we don't need PowerPoint slides. I mean, they could be useful. But when we're talking about the flow of a story, the set the scene and it's higher, that is also then connected when Suzanne was talking about like body language and your tone of voice. So we want to start with a la, 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 it's like this is setting the scene. But then, as storytellers, we want to use our tone of voice and then kind of go into the solve a problem, but however, and it's a deeper, slower tone of voice. Allow your audience to feel the kind of heaviness of this underperforming before we lift them up and have a however. We don't want to miss out on all of these things. These are the recommendations. These are the solutions. So the tone of voice is important rather than just being flat all the way through, because that brings the drama. And another top tip, or as a reminder for those who have already gone for precision selling, around how we use our hands. We kind of goes back to literature when you're talking about the storytelling. We read from, the majority of people in the world read from left to right. So, it's kind of like a mirror for yourself, but for the audience, it makes sense. So you might start over here, this is what's happened previously, but we're here today. And then use your left hand, which for your audience is over here. But this is the future. And your hands are higher up, right? And higher up, and the future is more positive. So every time you're talking like about your products, your brands like PepsiCo, you want to then be positioning and being able to put things in this positive space. Yes, but we're aware of other people. We're aware of some of the challenges, but we're here today to talk about how we can unlock this growth together. So how we use our body language and how we use our tone of voice through storytelling is much more powerful than the visual collateral of PowerPoint. And so enjoy being the storyteller, because that's the human connection, and use the information that your customer's already given you, their narrative from the notes and quotes. And you'll save yourself a load of time from creating PowerPoint. People get lost in it for hours, days, months. I don't know. Some people are probably still in PowerPoint, have never escaped that room, right? But it's just a different way, and give it a try.
Yeah, Stephen and Suzanne, as you were both talking there, I was reflecting on a lot of the great orators and powerful leaders throughout history. And, they were great at storytelling, the words, the tone, the body language, but particularly the body language and tone to really make impact. So I'm working with my son at the moment on a TED Talk he needs to do for humanities. And so I'm really enjoying imparting some expression for growth knowledge onto him, the right amount to not go too far. But boy, he's going to put on a good show. So everyone, that's the end of the compelling stories section, an extremely experiential, great part of the event. I've seen every team member who's part of these events gain so much from this section. What a great episode. Remember, you can visit the website precisionselling.scoreapp.com to explore your current state in relation to truly how to influence and motivate others. You can also use this with your team. Stephen has kindly provided us this access to be able to go and explore and understand ourselves and others. There were two key takeaways for me from this episode. The first one was setting effective meetings using Post. Such a simple concept, but boy, it creates powerful outcomes when two parties can effectively place themselves at a meeting before moving into it. So many people nowadays are just running from meeting to meeting without any structure and causing anxiety and stress and lack of outcomes. The second key takeaway for me was the power of effective questions, or powerful questions as Stephen and Susan put them. A simple concept that can create dramatic outcomes when done well. Thanks again for your time and knowledge, Susan and Stephen. Really looking forward to episode 3. Talk soon. Bye for now.